Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dawn Hacheney. Dawn Hacheney was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington. Her parents are Donald Tihara and Diana Parl. Her father, Donald, worked at a shipyard, and her mother, Diana, ran the household. Dawn is the oldest child and only daughter, with 3 younger brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek. Her family lives in Bremerton, Washington. According to her mother Diana, Dawn showed her religious devotion from an early age, embracing her faith and accepting God into her life when she was 4 years old. Dawn's childhood was difficult, however. Her parents suffered from anxiety and depression, leading to frequent conflicts at home. Despite these challenges in her childhood, Dawn did well in school, promising herself to get good grades. At age 12, she entered the Scripps National Spelling Bee, an experience that not only led her to the White House but also gave her the opportunity to meet the late President Ronald Reagan. Dawn graduated from Bremerton Christian School as valedictorian in 1988 before attending Northwest College of the Church of God in Seattle. While in college, Dawn met Nick Hacheney and they quickly formed a strong bond. However, her friends were concerned when she started calling him the one after only a few dates. They wanted Dawn to find someone who would truly care for and support her, but they worried that Nick was too aggressive and self-assured, which didn't seem to fit Dawn's personality. Interestingly, Nick's upbringing has some similarities to Dawn's. Nick was born and raised in Poulsbo, a coastal city in Washington. His family life was difficult from an early age. His father, Dan, was constantly immersed in his work as a mechanic, always distant when at home, neglecting his time and responsibilities for the family. His mother, Sandra, ran a daycare in the home and provided foster care, but Nick felt abandoned. He often confided in friends that he felt less loved than his siblings and even his foster children, and that his mother's affection for him was distasteful. Life was difficult with a depressed mother and a father who often neglected the family. Nick felt abandoned and emotionally isolated. Despite this, he found comfort in the Bible and became deeply involved in Christianity. His faith gave him confidence throughout his adolescence. Nick and Dawn first met in college. At first, Dawn's friends were confused by her interest in Nick, whose personality was the complete opposite of hers. Over time, they noticed a significant change in Dawn's behavior. Normally, she was confident, outgoing, independent, motivated, and always striving to achieve new goals. However, when she was with Nick, her personality changed dramatically. She became shy, introverted, and indecisive, often putting Nick's interests above her own, even when they made her feel uncomfortable. It seemed that Nick's influence brought out the worst in her, rather than the best. Despite this, their love continued to grow and their relationship remained strong. In 1990, Nick proposed to Dawn on Alki Beach and they became engaged. They married on April 20, 1991, and then moved back to Bremerton. By this time, both Dawn and Nick had completed their education. Dawn began working as a loan officer, and Nick began his work as a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, near Seattle. Nick had a desire to become a youth pastor, specifically targeting Christ Community Church due to his relationship with his former youth pastor, Bob, also known as P.B. Smith. At the time, P.B. Smith remained at the church, having overseen the church's affairs since the late 1980s, but now partnered with Pastor Robert Billy Craig to lead the congregation. P.B. Smith took a more friendly but conservative approach to church leadership, while Pastor Robert was known for his strict teachings. In their marriage, Nick made decisions without his wife Dawn, largely because they adhered to the principles of Christian fundamentalism. These principles dictate that the wife submit to the authority of her husband, which Nick and Dawn believed was in line with God's plan. At Christ Community Church, This ideology was clearly promoted and considered acceptable. The church even performed exorcisms for its members, encouraged large families as a divine mandate, and advocated homeschooling for children. Modesty in women was emphasized and questions about sexuality were taboo. Those who disagreed with these norms risked expulsion from the church, creating a climate of silence among dissenters for fear of expulsion. Dawn and her congregation are mired in what many call a cult, with her husband, Nick, playing a key role in these dangerous activities. Initially, Nick admires P.B. Smith, but he soon becomes dissatisfied with P.B. Smith's laid-back approach and feels he has not learned enough. He turns his admiration to Pastor Robert, who has a more extreme and strict approach. Nick seeks direct advice from Robert, distancing himself from his close relationship with P.B. Smith. In contrast, Pastor Robert sees Nick as an opportunity to advance his own agenda. He wants to remove P.B. Smith from his position as senior pastor and take control of the church. Robert's intentions are not sincere and he uses Nick to achieve his own goals. Meanwhile, Nick and his wife Dawn are facing challenges in their personal lives. They are constantly moving from house to house, renovating properties to sell. Dawn grew tired of this lifestyle and longed to settle down in a permanent home. By 1997, these issues were causing tension in their relationship. Nick found a house in need of repair in East Bremerton, planning to move in, renovate, and make it their home. However, the purchase, renovation, and home business plunged the couple into debt. Although their relationship seemed perfect, with Dawn seemingly a supportive wife who agreed with Nick's plans, there were underlying issues that were not immediately apparent. At the same time, Nick was getting into more debt by frequently lending money to people in their church. Nick embarked on his ambitious project of establishing a Christian youth camp. Despite financial difficulties, his passion for the project kept him going. He searched for the perfect location in Jefferson County, confident that he would find the ideal location. His determination intensified when a congregant, a woman named Sandy Glass, asserted receiving a divine vision affirming that the property Nick had his eye on was destined to become the site of the youth camp he envisioned. Sandy Glass, then in her early 20s, had faced hardships in her life. She had lost her first boyfriend to illness and her father in a construction accident. Her brother was addicted to drugs. Sandy was married to Jimmy, a carpenter, and they were struggling financially. A stay-at-home mother, Sandy depended on Jimmy's income, but her tendency to overspend often led to arguments between them. These disagreements sometimes caused Jimmy to scream or retreat, spending hours at the bar venting his frustrations. To resolve their marital problems, the couple sought help from the church and began attending marriage counseling sessions led by Nick, who had been the church's marriage counselor for many years. However, many parishioners filed complaints with Robert about Nick's counseling style, feeling uncomfortable with the way he prioritized intimate and often sexual topics over other important issues. Because of their trust in P.B. Smith, who was still affiliated with the church, members felt that Nick would not have been entrusted with the role if he were not trustworthy. However, in the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert took over as senior pastor, a move that was fully supported by the church council, replacing P.B. Smith. P.B. Smith and his wife then left to do missionary work in Africa. Jimmy's parents, who were also churchgoers, considered Sandy and Jimmy's decision to seek church intervention to be a hasty one. They even questioned Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. Their concerns grew when they noticed that Nick focused a lot of his attention on Sandy, rather than Sandy and Jimmy as a couple. This attention was not limited to counseling sessions. Nick and Sandy spent a lot of time talking on the phone and meeting outside of church. Jimmy's parents felt that the relationship between Nick and Sandy was unacceptable. They spent a lot of time together and seemed closer than a normal counselor and client should be. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, also noticed Nick's behavior and spoke to him privately about it. She told him that he needed to focus on his marriage and that his actions were inappropriate. After much complaining, Pastor Robert stepped in and told Sandy that her relationship with Nick was not working and needed to end. Sandy was angry with Pastor Robert's advice because she believed that she and Nick had a special relationship with God. She wrote him a letter saying that his judgment made it difficult for her to think that he believed in her ability to listen to God and help others. The relationship between Sandy and Nick had a negative impact on those around them. Dawn and Jimmy, as well as Jimmy's children from his previous marriage to Sandy, felt hurt and betrayed. One of the children even told Jimmy that Nick and Sandy had discussed Nick becoming their new father after Jimmy's death. Dawn began sharing with friends at church about her financial difficulties and her desire to have children, a desire that Nick strongly opposed. As 1997 drew to a close, Nick had relationships with several women in addition to Sandy. He engaged in private conversations and lengthy phone calls with these women. At the same time, Sandy's alleged visions grew stronger, prompting Nick to prioritize the establishment of her youth camp and devote more time to their relationship, as she believed they were destined to be together. On the contrary, Dawn made a lot of effort to rekindle Nick's happiness with her, even trying to lose weight. Some of the women in the congregation supported her, telling her that the problems in their relationship were not her fault, but Nick's own. Unfortunately, Dawn's life with Nick did not turn out as she had hoped when they got married. When Christmas came, Dawn woke up feeling unwell with a cold. Despite being sick, she and Nick spent the day with their family. That evening, they visited P.B. Smith's house and spent time with his family. Nick had plans to go hunting with Lindsay, P.B. Smith's daughter, and her friends the next morning, the 26th. Nick met his friends at the Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County to go hunting just before dawn. They spent a few hours in the woods without shooting anything and decided to leave. Around 9 a.m., they went to a local diner for breakfast. While eating, Nick suddenly stood up, looking worried, and said, "Dawn and I haven't opened our Christmas presents yet." He left the diner at 9:30 a.m. and arrived home at 10 a.m. to find his wife dead in a fire. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered that the fire had initially started in the bedroom, due to a malfunctioning space heater. The fire quickly spread due to newspapers and wrapping paper in the room, and was made worse by multiple propane tanks on the floor. Nick told friends at the diner that he and his family had not opened their Christmas presents. But he told police a different story. According to Nick, they had actually opened their presents the night before. He said that Dawn had gone to bed feeling unwell and left the wrapping paper scattered around. Nick also confirmed that he had received a propane tank as a Christmas present. The couple was in the process of renovating their home and had used the heater to stay warm during the winter. However, these old fireplaces were not as safe as modern ones and often caused fires and deaths. The police found no inconsistencies in Nick's story. As a local pastor, Nick's status in the community gave the police no reason to suspect anything else. And his wife's death, which was ruled an accident. The congregation was concerned for Nick's health and wanted to support him during this difficult time. Pastor Robert even offered to try to revive Dawn through prayer, but Nick refused, saying he did not want her to suffer any potential pain. This refusal surprised Robert, as Nick had previously been willing to participate in church activities, including the exorcisms they had performed. Mary Glass, Sandy's mother-in-law, immediately suspected Nick of being involved in Dawn's death. Convinced that it was no accident, she urged her husband to report the situation to the police, but this never happened. Soon after, the police officially declared Dawn's death an accident and referred the case to Nick's insurance company. Nick began the process of collecting on Dawn's life insurance, which raised some suspicions from family and friends. They thought it was unusual for Nick to settle the insurance so quickly after Dawn's death, but they understood that the couple had significant debt and that Nick needed the money to pursue his plans for the youth camp. Some church members found Nick's way of grieving unusual, but they refrained from expressing concern, believing that everyone deals with grief differently. The church community came together to remember Dawn's life at her funeral. Family and friends shared stories and remembered her life. Although everyone was sad, Nick remained calm throughout and even gave a 45-minute speech in Dawn's honor. When friends helped him clean out his house, they found several photos of Dawn hidden in the back of a closet, making it seem as though he wanted to throw them away. After that, Nick's behavior became increasingly harsh and insensitive, not only toward some church members but also toward neighbors and friends. He had many romantic relationships with women in the congregation. In a shocking turn of events, Nick began an intimate relationship with Diana, Dawn's mother, under the guise of grief over his widowhood. His actions became too much for Pastor Robert to bear, and Nick was asked to leave Christ Community Church. This eviction had a significant impact on Nick, marking the beginning of his growing troubles. On April 10, 2001, Sandy and her attorney met with the district attorney. The district attorney offered Sandy immunity in exchange for her testimony about a secret she had kept since December 26, 1997. According to Sandy, on the morning of Dawn's death, Nick called her and said, "I did it." However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by another incoming call on Sandy's phone, leaving Nick waiting to answer the call from someone at the church who had informed him of Dawn's case. After the second call ended, Sandy returned to the conversation with Nick and asked him to clarify what he meant. Nick simply repeated, "It's over, it's over." Sandy did not ask for further details about the call for several weeks. Eventually, Sandy confronted Nick, who confessed to giving Dawn an overdose of Benadryl and then suffocating her by placing a plastic bag over her face. Tragically, Dawn was still partially conscious and aware of what her husband was doing as she suffocated. After she died, Nick carefully placed old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, including under her body, and placed propane tanks near the bed. He then turned on the heater to burn and start the fire, in an attempt to destroy any evidence of the crime and make it look like an accident. Dawn's autopsy revealed no soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs or blood. The pathologist who examined Dawn ruled her death an accidental fire. They missed crucial evidence of carbon monoxide binding to red blood cells, suggesting that she had not been breathing during the fire. Despite having 5 times the normal amount of Benadryl in her system, the pathologist concluded that the amount was not enough to cause respiratory failure, arguing that even if Dawn had been drowsy, she would have reacted to the increased temperature. Notably, crime scene photos showed newspapers under Dawn's body, a disturbing detail that was largely overlooked. A fire marshal became suspicious and spoke to the police, but he had no authority to decide whether Dawn's death was accidental. Nick was arrested on September 12, 2001, in the Kinko's parking lot. He adamantly denied any involvement in Dawn's death and claimed the church was trying to frame him. Despite his claims that church members could cause serious harm, Nick was charged with first-degree murder and his bail was set at $750,000. Sandy's account, when relayed to the police, added to the frustration. Over the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick a suspect or making an arrest, and her reason for cooperating, stemming from anger over Nick's relationships with other women in the church. Church members reported Nick's strange behavior and inappropriate relationships when questioned. They were also upset that he did not buy a tombstone for Dawn after receiving the life insurance payout. On September 17, 2001, Nick pleaded not guilty in court. He claimed that the church had cursed him and that Pastor Robert had a dark influence beyond the understanding of the police. When Nick's trial began, Nick Hacheney was charged with aggravated first-degree murder, which carries a sentence of life in prison without parole. Witnesses, including women who were involved with Nick and church members who had been counseled by him, shared their testimonies with the jury. These testimonies showed the major impact the church had on their lives, including experiences of visions and messages supposedly from God. Nick used these to control and manipulate them. P.B. Smith's daughter also testified, sharing how she met Nick through her father when she was a teenager. Nick seduced her, and they had sex after Dawn's death. This continued until she moved away about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts also testified, emphasizing that Dawn's body held important clues regarding her death. However, these indicators were ignored, as mentioned earlier, because Nick was a pastor. However, on December 26, 2002, 5 years after Dawn's tragic death, the jury deliberated for a day before returning a guilty verdict on first-degree murder against Nick Hacheney. At his sentencing hearing on February 7, 2003, Nick addressed the court, which was filled with Dawn's loved ones. He continued to maintain his innocence, but also expressed remorse for his actions and sadness for his family's loss, saying that Dawn deserved better treatment. He was sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court resulted in his life sentence being modified. The appeal argued that, because Dawn died as a result of Nick strangling her, the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder in connection with her death by arson did not match her actual cause of death. The defense argued that Nick therefore did not deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the appeal, changing Nick's sentence to 26 years in prison. While in prison, Nick was involved in many positive initiatives. He co-founded the Environmental Progress Reentry Network and introduced a waste management system that used vermicompost. Nick could be released from prison soon, as he is eligible for parole in 2025. Sadly, Dawn's life took a tragic turn. She thought she had found the right person, but the reality was very different. This led to a devastating betrayal and her heartbreaking death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Behnaz Mahmud. Behnaz Mahmud was born on December 16, 1985 in Iraq. She comes from an Iraqi Kurdish family with strong religious traditions. Her parents, Mahmud Babakar Mahmud and his wife, had 6 children, 1 son, Bahman, and 5 daughters, Baza, Beel, Han, Jaban, and Behnaz. They lived in a rural tribal area in Iraqi Kurdistan, adhering to traditional values, especially regarding women's roles. In 1995, when Behnaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the UK. However, this change in location did not alter their deeply held religious and traditional views. Despite being in a more liberal European country, the family continued to reject modern opinion and lived within their tight-knit religious community. At 17, Behnaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who had recently arrived from Iraq. He did not speak English and lacked basic literacy skills. Behnaz having met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding. Behnaz, described as a girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, followed tradition and moved into her new husband's home, despite him being a stranger to her. From the start, Behnaz suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband. Despite having lived in the UK and being aware of her rights, she was trapped in a cycle of violence. She tried to leave her husband multiple times, but her family forced her to return, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmud family. With no support from her relatives, Behnaz turned to the police twice, but they failed to take action, leaving her vulnerable to further abuse. In July 2005, after 2 years of marriage, Behnaz finally escaped her husband's house and returned to her parents' home. After leaving her husband, Behnaz felt a sense of freedom. She met Ramith Soleimani, and they fell deeply in love. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. They would only communicate twice a day, exchanging messages in the morning and evening. Rometh was unlike the men surrounding Banaz, as he was calm, wise, and courteous. He treated she with great respect and kindness, instantly winning her heart. Before long, they began envisioning a future together, discussing wedding plans and a happy family life. They even chose names for their potential children. These joyful dreams brought Banaz happiness and gave her the strength to cope with the hatred and aggression from her family. In early October 2005, Banaz was walking down the street when she noticed a car following her. She recognized the people inside as Kurdish migrants sent by her father. Knowing her family's history, Banaz became terrified for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz visited the police station again. During a 2-hour conversation, she shared detailed information about her life with her husband, including the physical abuse she suffered, her family's resentment, and the recent surveillance. She told the police that her husband had repeatedly beaten her, and during one incident, he nearly knocked out her tooth because she dared to call him by his first name in public. Banaz had previously informed the police that she feared for her life, but her concerns were ignored. The police failed to investigate her claims, neglecting to interview her family and husband to verify the accuracy of the information. She was told to contact them again if she felt threatened. Banaz and her boyfriend, Rometh, secretly met for about 2 months without being detected. However, in early December 2005, they were spotted by members of her family near a London subway station. This information was immediately reported to her father. That evening, her male relatives gathered at the family home, where they discussed her actions and deemed them unacceptable. Her uncle, Ari Mahmud, declared that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation. Following this, Banaz went to the police again and explained that she had been under surveillance for months. She also told them that her family intended to kill her. She provided a list of 5 family members who were involved in the plot, but the police did not take her seriously. A serious mistake was made, which led to Banaz's disappearance. To uncover her fate, investigators must untangle a complicated network of lies, violence, and disregard for the truth. 2 weeks later, Banaz's father deceives her into visiting a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. Upon arrival, he forces her to drink brandy and leaves her alone in a room with the TV on. As she turns around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing her life is in danger, Banaz rushes to the front door, but it's locked. To escape, she breaks a window, cutting her hands on the shards. Banaz manages to reach a nearby cafe, where she collapses. Paramedics arrive and take her to the hospital, where the police are called. When Banaz regains consciousness, she contacts Rometh and asks him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Banaz moves in with Rometh Soleimani. They celebrate the start of 2006 together and are happy. However, by mid-January, the Mahmud family begins to pressure Banaz to return home, supposedly to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rometh. Banaz trusted her parents and agreed to return to her father's house, believing her mother would protect her if her father became violent. To be safe, Banaz went to the police station again and gave a full statement, including the names of people she thought might harm her. Despite her fears, she returned to her family home. On January 22, 2006, Rometh was attacked by 3 men in the street who tried to force him into a car. He managed to fight back and reported the incident to the police. 2 days later, Rometh and Banaz were due to give a statement at the police station, but Banaz failed to appear. Rometh attempted to reach Banaz Mahmud, but lost contact with her after she vanished upon returning to her family's residence. Rometh, who had been in constant touch with Banaz, grew increasingly worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. After numerous appeals, the police finally took action. The disappearance of Banaz Mahmut sparked an investigation led by the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, with Chief Inspector Caroline Good at the helm. Initially, it was suspected that Banaz was being held captive in a house within the community. To locate her, Inspector Good organized an extensive search linked to the Mahmut family. Banaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband were brought in for questioning as suspects. The police also began searching for 3 other men listed by Banaz in December 2005, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hama, all of whom were her cousins. However, when the police searched the neighborhood and tried to question her family members, and the family refused to cooperate with the investigation into her disappearance. Police found no photos of Banaz at her family's home, and her family's complete lack of concern shocked officers. Caroline Good then focused on 30 individuals, all of whom were arrested and questioned. During the investigation, over 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones were seized from those involved. Every person questioned attempted to hinder the investigation, providing conflicting accounts of Banaz's whereabouts. Some claimed to have seen her after she went missing, while others, including her mother, refused to cooperate with the police. Some even suggested she was in hiding. Realizing that no one would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to bug the cells of those arrested. At that point, Banaz's father, her uncle, and Mohammed Hama remained in police custody. 2 other men under investigation had managed to escape to Iraq. The detectives were horrified when they received the initial wiretap results. Not only did the 3 arrested men show no remorse, but they also took pleasure in recounting the details of Banaz's death. Their conversations revealed that on January 23, the Mahmut family intentionally left their home, allowing Omar Hussein and Hama to enter. Once inside, they attacked Banaz, subjecting her to a 2-hour ordeal of beatings and violence. As the torture came to an end, Hama wrapped a cord around Banaz's neck and strangled her. When recalling the final moments of Banaz's life, Hama couldn't contain his laughter. However, it was Mohammed Hama's admission of being present when Rameth was threatened that became the turning point in the case. While Hama was being held in a cell awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good listened to these recordings with growing horror as the suspect proudly described the gruesome details of the murder. In the recordings, Hama provided a detailed account of what they did to Banaz. Despite being terrified and vomiting, Banaz remained silent. Hama then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times, pulling it so tight that it dug into her skin. As he continued to speak with excitement, he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the perpetrators over 30 minutes to kill Banaz. The brutality of the crime was too much for Caroline Good and the detectives, and they couldn't hold back their tears. Banaz's cousin, Dana Amin, 30, was present in the house and helped the perpetrator put Banaz's body in a suitcase. Muhammad Ali then dragged the suitcase out of the house to a waiting car nearby. Hama revealed that a police car drove by, but the officers didn't notice the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow protruding from it. The very people meant to protect Banaz were involved in plotting her murder. They strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and took it outside of London. Snippets of conversation mentioned a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good used the information gathered and matched it with the movement data from the arrested suspects' phones to identify the search area. Due to the vastness of the area, the search could have taken a long time. During a conversation with the suspects, one of them suddenly turned to the other and asked if they had put the freezer back where it originally was. This sparked an idea for Caroline Good, now knew what to look for. A police helicopter was deployed to scan the area and spotted a house with a backyard filled with trash, including a white oblong object resembling a freezer that stood out among the black garbage bags. Upon closer inspection of the suspicious house, the officers' suspicions were confirmed. The police officers began digging, but as the hole reached shoulder depth, they were on the verge of giving up, all except Caroline Good. She recalled the words of Mohammed Hama, who had boasted to relatives that he had buried the victim so deep that she would only be found with the help of an informant. Caroline Good convinced the team to extend the search for another day. On the evening of April 28, 2006, their persistence paid off, and the suitcase was finally found. Unfortunately, Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, making it necessary to rely on dental records and DNA samples for identification. Her body was discovered folded into a fetal position, hidden in a suitcase and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a Birmingham house. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were formally charged with the crime. However, they displayed no remorse, convinced that their actions were justified. Mohammed Hama even claimed that the case would not go to trial, as he believed he was simply carrying out an act of retaliation. Meanwhile, Caroline Good faced renewed opposition from the Kurdish diaspora community. Following the discovery of Banaz's remains, numerous individuals came forward to provide alibis for the suspects, claiming that they were in public on the day of the alleged and therefore could not have committed the crime. Approximately 50 individuals were involved or connected to Banaz's death in various capacities. Reflecting on the events, Caroline Good recalled feeling intense anger, disgust, and contempt for the men involved. She noted that 50 men had participated in the murder of one woman, and they took pride in their actions, which they saw as a demonstration of their masculinity. In March 2007, the trial against Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Hamad began at London Central Criminal Court. Prosecutor Victor Temple described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was orchestrated by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury delivered finding all three defendants guilty of the charges and ineligible for leniency. The sentences handed down were severe. The father received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years, the uncle was given life with a 23-year minimum, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Judge Brian Barker was scathing in his delivery of the verdict, stating, "You decided that your so-called family honor needed to be restored, which meant she had to die and her memory erased. This is a heinous and heartless crime. What kind of honor is it when a father prioritizes his social status over the life of his own child?" A mere 4 months after the trio's conviction, London police were informed that Muhammad Ali had been arrested in Iraq for a crime committed against a young boy. Muhammad Ali had taken his own life. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, had been hiding in rural Iraq, attempting to avoid public detection. However, in December 2009, he was shot in the leg during an altercation with one of his brothers and required medical attention. Upon arriving at the hospital, police were notified and subsequently arrested him. Initially, Omar Hussein denied being in London in 2005, thereby claiming innocence in Banaz's death. But UK Social Security records revealed that he had been receiving refugee benefits during that time, contradicting his statement. The court ultimately sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin was given an 8 years prison sentence for his role in disposing of Banaz Mahmoud's body and hindering the investigation. A recorded interview with Banaz at a police station implicated her family in the crime. Banaz had previously handed in a letter to a police station in South London, naming individuals who threatened to kill her and her boyfriend Rameth. The individuals named in the letter were from Banaz's family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community. They were angry about her decision to divorce her husband, who treated her poorly. Despite several attempts to leave him, Banaz returned due to family pressure. The police failed to respond properly to Banaz's situation, which ultimately resulted in her death. However, this case prompted significant changes in how honor-related cases are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched after Banaz's death, and an independent commission investigated 9 police officers for their inadequate response to her allegations. 7 officers received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. It is essential to recognize the tireless efforts of Caroline Good and her team, who successfully located Banaz's body, secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought the escaped perpetrators back from Iraq. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held in her honor on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the installation of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. The memorial was attended by a small group of people, including Rahmat Soleimani, Caroline Good, and Banaz's 2 sisters. Notably, Banaz's family did not attend either service. Rahmat Soleimani, who had been living in the UK under witness protection, was profoundly affected by Banaz's death. He penned a heartfelt letter expressing his love and grief, describing Banaz as the love of his life and his entire world. Unfortunately, his pain and suffering continued, and in May 2016, 10 years after the tragedy, he took his own life. This was his 3rd attempt to end his life, a devastating consequence of the trauma he had endured. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam Hacheney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the Hacheney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the three of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship. He considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoe box, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in a car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Birbeck. Lindsay was born in Blackburn, Lancashire, northwest England. She and her husband, Tim Birbeck, separated in July 2018, but they continued living together until March 2019. At that time, Lindsay moved to a new home on Burnley Road in Hanko. As a mother, Lindsay cared for her 2 adult children, Divin, 20, and Sarah, 17. Professionally, she worked as a teacher's aide at Atton Hill Elementary School in Burnley. She enjoyed being around children and was known for her artistic talent. Lindsay would often go the extra mile to create impressive props for school productions. On August 12, Lindsay went for a walk in the wooded area of Coppice, near her Hanko home. However, when her daughter Sarah and Sarah's boyfriend Brandon arrived at the house for a scheduled tea party, Lindsay was nowhere to be found. This was unusual, as Lindsay was not one to forget appointments. Sarah tried calling Lindsay multiple times, but there was no answer. She sent Lindsay a text message saying, "Where are you? We sat outside for an hour and called 6 times." When Lindsay didn't respond, Sarah sent another message with a series of question marks, but still received no reply. After waiting for an hour outside Lindsay's house, Sarah called her father, Tim Birbeck, since her mother was not home and not answering her phone. Tim took Sarah and her brother Brandon to his house around midnight. Later, Sarah and Tim went back to Lindsay's house with a spare set of keys, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. The house looked undisturbed, and there were no signs of anything out of the ordinary or a note explaining Lindsay's whereabouts. At 12:11 a.m. on August 13th, Tim contacted the police to report Lindsay missing, stating, "Lindsay seems to be missing. We can't find her." Lindsay's disappearance shocked the community, prompting a massive search effort. Hundreds of people, including families with strollers and teenagers, joined the search, even if they didn't know Lindsay personally. After days of searching, posting on social media, and putting up posters, the community gathered at a local spot called Coppice for 2 days, hoping to find a clue to help solve the mystery of Lindsay's disappearance. The search continued non-stop despite the challenges. Thousands of posters with Lindsay's picture were distributed throughout the neighborhood. A Facebook group to aid the search gained 10,000 members. Posters soon appeared everywhere, including lamp posts, storefronts, and traffic lights, asking for help in finding Lindsay. Police launched a thorough investigation into Lindsay's disappearance, conducting extensive searches around her house and the surrounding countryside. A team of specialists, including police officers, dog handlers, firefighters, and mountain rescue volunteers, scoured the area. They also deployed drones and helicopters to cover a wide range, including popular walking and running routes. For days after Lindsay went missing, police released CCTV footage showing her last seen walking along Burnley Road towards Coppice at 4:10 p.m. She was wearing a distinctive purple jacket, black leggings, and dark sneakers with white soles. As a week passed since her disappearance, hopes of finding Lindsay alive began to dwindle. Despite the efforts of the police, her whereabouts remained a mystery. However, the police emphasized that there was no evidence to suggest she was the victim of a crime, leaving a glimmer of hope that she might still be found alive. That evening, hundreds of local residents joined forces for the first mass public search of Coppice, following a rallying call on social media. A local resident's dog ran into the woods at Errington Cemetery, prompting its owner to follow. The dog didn't respond to its owner's calls, instead hiding its head in the bushes and sniffing at something. As the owner approached, they felt something soft underfoot, which frightened them. A terrible smell and swarming flies surrounded a plastic bag, with what appeared to be a foot visible. On August 24th, Lindsay Bobek's body was discovered 12 days after her disappearance. Her naked body was buried in the cemetery, wrapped in 2 clear plastic bags and mixed with earth and grass, in a shallow grave. With this discovery, the search for Lindsay Bobek was concluded, and a murder investigation officially began. Pathologist Dr. Naomi Carter conducted an autopsy and found that the cause of death was a broken neck, likely caused by a forceful blow from a foot or knee. The trauma was so severe that the entire larynx was crushed. Additionally, it appeared that someone had attempted to cut off the right leg after death, possibly using a saw, leaving a large laceration that cut down to the bone. Due to the poor condition of the body, Dr. Carter had difficulty determining the full extent of the injuries. While she couldn't rule out the possibility of sexual activity on the day of the disappearance, the level of decomposition made it impossible to confirm. Before the body was found, the area had been searched by police and community volunteers for several days, but nothing was discovered. A blue wheelie garbage can was spotted in nearby bushes, but its significance was not yet realized at that stage of the investigation. Volunteers searched the cemetery on August 20th at 9 p.m. and found a dumpster with a dark stain that they suspected might be blood. They took pictures and called the police, who arrived to inspect the dumpster. However, the police officers thought the dark stain was just dirt and noted that the dumpster looked new. With no evidence linking it to Lindsay's disappearance, they left it in place. Other clues were found in the cemetery but weren't immediately considered significant. Christine Alderson, a local resident, discovered a bloody cloth on the grass on August 18th while walking her dogs. She believed the blood was fresh but thought it might belong to a homeless man who often visited the area. Judith Bibby, another dog walker, reported seeing what was likely Lindsay's jacket hanging on a barbed wire fence near the Cardial Hill Trail. On August 25th, investigators returned to the crime scene and discovered a yellow-handled saw and a pair of green heavy-duty gloves near Lindsay's grave. The gloves had blood on them and were sent for forensic testing. The test results showed that the gloves contained the perpetrator's DNA on the inside and Lindsay's DNA on the outside of the left glove. Additionally, investigators found a pair of Lindsay's Skechers sneakers in a blue plastic bag in the cemetery. The shoes had been cut along the sole. Further examination revealed that Lindsay's body was wrapped in plastic sheeting, with foliage and grass that didn't match the cemetery grounds between her body and the sheeting. This led investigators to believe that Lindsay's body had been moved from another location. The discovery of the moved body led detectives to recall a blue trash can that had caught the attention of volunteers. Upon reviewing CCTV footage, police officers made a surprising discovery that left the investigation team perplexed. Several images showed a young man pulling a blue wheelie garbage can in the Burley Road area over the course of a few days. A CCTV camera caught the same individual returning to the cemetery on 4 separate occasions. This footage helped identify a suspect. A video of the young man carrying a trash can down the street, possibly containing Lindsay's body, gained widespread attention. The video was broadcast on the news with a request for help identifying the individual, which proved successful. The individual in the video was identified as Rocky Marciano Rocky, a local resident who lived with his parents and 5 siblings on Winnie Hill Road in Arrington. The Rocky family had resided in this home for approximately 3 decades. Rocky struggled with a range of mental health issues, including autism, attention deficit disorder, and hyperactivity, which he had experienced since childhood. Additionally, his low IQ presented challenges with learning and communication. Rocky attended an alternative school in Barnoldswick several days a week, where teachers described him as a quiet and nonverbal student. In 2015, a psychologist evaluated Rocky and found he had difficulty understanding his emotions and how they related to events. A 2016 report noted that Rocky was unresponsive to strangers and required constant supervision. According to Timothy Bradley, a teacher at his school, Rocky showed little interest in academics, preferring practical activities. He rarely engaged in conversations, even about topics that interested him. Rocky was physically strong and enjoyed activities like going to the gym, caring for chickens, and playing Xbox. Rocky often seemed detached from reality and unaware of his actions. His attack on Lindsay Bubeck appeared to be motivated by a desire to kill a woman, and she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The murder was a random act committed by a stranger. On August 12, 2020, 1 year after the crime, Rocky Marciano Rocky went on trial. After an 8-day retrial and 4 hours of deliberation, the jury delivered a unanimous guilty verdict. Rocky, 17, showed no reaction via video link from Her Majesty's Prison, Wetherby. His parents, present in court, also remained expressionless. Rocky had pleaded guilty to aiding in the disposal of Lindsay's body but denied any role in her death. He claimed a male stranger approached him and offered a fee to help bury she. In a prepared statement, Rocky admitted to moving the garbage can and burying the body, but maintained he had no involvement in Lindsay's death. However, evidence collected from his home in Arrington, including identical plastic bags found at Lindsay's grave and a tracksuit matching the one he wore in surveillance footage from August 12, 16, and 17, contradicted his claims. Defense attorney Mark Van Hull stated to the jurors that although Rocky committed a reprehensible act by burying her body in the cemetery, he maintains that Rocky was not responsible for her death, despite the substantial evidence against him. The judge sentenced Rocky to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. He will be eligible for release only when the parole board determines he is no longer a danger to society. The judge described the attack as swift and brutal, and stated that Rocky clearly intended to kill a woman who was walking in the area just minutes before Lindsay's murder. Security footage shows that Rocky Price made 2 return visits to the location where Lindsay was killed on the evening of August 12. At 6:55 p.m., he was captured on CCTV carrying a black backpack, likely containing a saw to dismember the victim's body. At 8:28 p.m., he was seen at the same location, where he would eventually dispose of the body. With no visible signs of panic or distress, Rocky Price carried out a calculated plan to dispose of Lindsay's body. He carefully placed it in a blue trash can, wrapping it in 2 plastic bags, before burying it in a shallow grave at Arrington Cemetery. The fact that he stalked another woman before killing Lindsay Bubeck indicates that his crime was premeditated, rather than a spontaneous loss of control. Lindsay's funeral took place at St. Margaret's Church in Hapton on September 20th. Over 200 people attended the service, which was briefly interrupted by police stopping traffic on Manchester Road to allow Lindsay's coffin, adorned with flowers, to be carried into the church. The scene was filled with dozens of bouquets from friends, family, and strangers who were moved by Lindsay's story. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Abril Perez. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971, in Monterrey, northeastern Mexico, to parents Maria del Seguro Sagan and Manuel Perez. She was the second of 3 children. Abril demonstrated exceptional mathematical and entrepreneurial abilities from a young age. She was a dedicated reader and consistently ranked as the top student in her class. As a teenager, Abril prioritized achieving financial independence, showcasing remarkable discipline and effective time management skills. Following high school, Abril attended the most prestigious university in New Leon, where she obtained a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her peers described her as intelligent, focused, and ambitious, while also being kind, cheerful, and always willing to assist others. After graduating, Abril secured a position in the sales department of one of the country's largest and fastest-growing companies. She later transitioned into digital sales, a rapidly expanding field, and discovered her true passion. Abril quickly rose through the ranks and became the executive director of the company within 2 years. Abril was a young, beautiful, and successful woman who was rapidly achieving her life goals. She had built a stellar career, supported her family, and had big plans for the future. However, her personal life was still unfulfilled, which worried her loved ones. Despite this, Abril was confident that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. But she had no idea how her future marriage to the seemingly perfect man would turn out. That man was Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, whom she met in the mid-1990s when her career was taking off. Juan Carlos was just 3 years older than Abril and shared her ambitious drive, which drew her to him. He, in turn, was captivated by her stunning looks, charming personality, kind heart, bright smile, sharp intellect, and remarkable determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious science and technology university, where he excelled in economics and trade. He then continued his studies at Harvard University in the United States. After returning to Mexico, he built a successful career in the emerging field of e-commerce. Juan Carlos and Abril met at a conference on the latest financial technologies. Their companies collaborated on several projects, allowing them to cross paths multiple times. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized he had developed feelings for Abril, who was intelligent and beautiful. He obtained her phone number through mutual acquaintances and asked her out on a date. Abril was also attracted to Juan Carlos, finding him to be educated, elegant, and engaging in conversation on a wide range of topics. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that point, they had both achieved significant success in their careers and were working on developing online stores, a field with great potential. Their life seemed like a fairy tale, inspiring envy and admiration from those around them. However, surface of their perfect family, there were some dark secrets. It wasn't until 2001, 3 years after their wedding, that they had their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia. The arrival of their child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband appeared happy, showing their newborn daughter love and admiration. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son, named Juan Carlos Jr., after his father. 2 more years passed, and the family had another child, a boy named Julio Andres. Despite having 3 young children, Abril hardly took any time off work and managed to balance parenting with career advancement. She made homemade meals, helped with schoolwork, took the children to sports activities, and aimed to be both a perfect mother and their best friend. Outwardly, the Perez Sanchez family seemed perfect, wealthy, successful, with 3 lovely children and everything they could want. However, their home life remained a secret, even from their closest relatives, for a long time. In the early years of their relationship, Juan Carlos revealed his true personality to Abril. He had a short temper, was aggressive, and had a tendency to be overly harsh, refusing to compromise and insisting that everything be done his way. Initially, Abril was in love and believed that as time passed, Juan Carlos's rough edges would smooth out. Their shared projects brought them together, and their collaboration led to significant accomplishments, including financial success. However, as the years went by, Juan Carlos's irritability grew, and verbal arguments escalated into physical confrontations. Following the birth of their first daughter, he made a brief effort to control his emotions, but this change was short-lived. A similar attempt was made after the birth of their eldest son, but by the time their third child arrived, Juan Carlos no longer made any effort to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos frequently directed his anger and frustration at Abril and disregarding her emotional well-being. He would insult and belittle her, the mother of his children, and seemed to feel better when she cried. He regularly physically harmed her, doing so in a way that left no visible marks, allowing her to hide the bruises with clothing or makeup. His goal was to maintain his reputation as a model family man, loving husband, and father. Abril kept quiet about the abuse for years, not even telling her sister and mother about the ongoing situation. She earned a good income and could have raised the children on her own, providing them with a good education and stable upbringing. However, her husband was wealthy and influential, and she knew he could use the courts to take the children away from her. Knowing Juan Carlos's true nature, Abril couldn't bear the thought of her children being left alone with him, as she considered him a monster capable of anything. When the family situation reached a boiling point, what was once considered an ideal household now raised suspicions that something was terribly wrong. Abril was not just subdued, but deeply distressed and visibly struggling. She had lost weight, slept poorly, and frequently had bruises on her face and body that were becoming harder to hide and explain. Despite this, Juan Carlos appeared calm and confident in public, pretending that everything was fine. He played the role of a loving and caring husband, interacting with Abril politely and affectionately. However, at home, he transformed into a menacing figure. Despite loved ones urging Abril to divorce him, she insisted that everything was fine and that she could handle the problems with her husband on her own. 2014 marked the peak of Juan Carlos' career when he became the head of a major trading company, making him one of the most influential people in his field. Following this promotion, his family relocated to Mexico City, settling into a large house in one of the capital's upscale neighborhoods. Their children began attending an elite private school. Abril had genuinely hoped that this change of environment would improve their relationship. However, contrary to her expectations, the abuse continued. Juan Carlos often persisted in physically and verbally abusing his wife in front of their children. He increasingly accused her of infidelity without any basis for his claims. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he would resort to physical violence, insisting he would find evidence of her supposed disloyalty. Juan Carlos monitored her phone and emails, forbade her from using social media, and when finding no evidence, he hiring a private detective to follow her and photograph any men who came near her. For 4 years, she tried every possible way to save her marriage. Despite her efforts, her husband's behavior became increasingly unbearable, creating a never-ending nightmare for her. To outsiders, however, their union appeared happy and successful, even enviable, due to her husband's wealth, influence, and seemingly caring nature. In 2018, the Juan Carlos and Abril visited to the Abril's family. During this trip, Juan Carlos treated his wife poorly in front of her parents, who were deeply disturbed by what they saw. This incident marked a turning point for Abril, and she realized that she could no longer continue living this way. She informed her husband that she would file for divorce as soon as they returned to Mexico City. Hearing this, Juan Carlos became enraged, grabbed her throat, and squeezed it so tightly that she nearly lost consciousness. Fortunately, her mother, Maria del Soro, entered the room and raised the alarm, preventing a tragedy. When the family returned to their home in the capital, Abril prepared for divorce and moved from the marital bedroom to a small guest room. However, this did not keep her safe from her husband's abuse. On January 4th, while Abril was still asleep, her husband entered the room holding a baseball bat. He struck her hard on the head and was about to swing again. Half awake, Abril barely understood what was happening, but she managed to roll off the bed just in time, saving her own life. She began to scream, and the children ran into the room, having heard the noise. The youngest son shielded his mother with his body, while the eldest son took the bat away from his father. Together, they fled the house and headed to the hospital, as Abril needed medical attention. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep laceration above her eyebrow that required stitches. After Abril and their sons left the house, Juan Carlos contacted his lawyer to discuss the situation and asked for help in resolving the marital conflict. However, Juan Carlos also posted on social media, accusing his wife of betraying him by being unfaithful and planning to leave him for another man, taking their children and attempting to claim all their jointly acquired assets. Additionally, Juan Carlos claimed that Abril had stolen all the money from their home safe and had injured him with a knife when he tried to stop her. He posted photos of a bloodied knife and brown stains on the floor as evidence. However, the blood on the floor actually belonged to Abril from her own injury, and the knife photo was taken from the internet. Despite the fabrication, Juan Carlos's friends believed his story and actively shared and reposted his account on their social media pages, calling for widespread attention to this supposedly egregious case. Juan Carlos's attempt to kill Abril prompted her to take swift action. From her hospital bed, she filed a police report against him, accusing him of trying to take her life. After her release from the hospital, Abril packed up her two young sons and left the family home. Her oldest child, who was attending college in a nearby city, also condemned his father's violent actions. While waiting for justice, she started providing online support and consultations to women who were going through similar experiences. She also planned to open a center that would offer psychological and legal help to victims of domestic violence who had been failed by the justice system. It wasn't until 8.5 months after the incident, in September 2019, that Juan Carlos was finally arrested and charged with inflicting bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was put in jail, where he spent over a month, but he managed to appeal the decision to keep him in detention before his trial. As a result, he was released from jail by November of that year. Judge Federo presided over the case, reclassifying it and ordering a new trial. During the trial, Abril's medical records and photos were not presented as evidence. Her and her son's testimonies were deemed insufficient to detain Juan Carlos because he claimed Abril was manipulating their children against him. The judge released Juan Carlos, concluding his actions didn't pose a direct threat to Abril's life. Abril was shocked and terrified when Juan Carlos was released. She suspected he had bribed his way to freedom, putting her and their children in danger. She wrote to the judge, expressing her fear, but it had no immediate effect. Juan Carlos then initiated a custody battle, forcing Abril to return to Mexico City with their sons to attend court hearings. Abril arrived in Mexico City on November 25th with her children. She had a legitimate fear of her longtime partner and wanted to avoid him. To minimize the risk of an encounter, she planned to leave the city immediately after a court hearing that day. In fact, she had already bought the plane ticket, but Juan Carlos already knew that. After the court session, Abril, her sons, and their lawyer got into a car headed to the airport. However, they never made it to their destination. At a traffic light, a motorcyclist suddenly pulled up next to their car, drew a handgun, and fired 2 shots at Parl, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. The attacker then quickly fled the scene. A shooting occurred, and one of the bullets grazed the younger son, who was sitting in the back seat. Fortunately, none of the children were seriously injured. However, the injured Parl was rushed to the nearest hospital where doctors fought to save her life for more than 6 hours. Unfortunately, due to severe injuries and significant blood loss, they were unable to save her. Parl passed away that evening. The victim's family, including her parents, brother, and sister, immediately flew to the capital and urged authorities to arrest Juan Carlos, whom they believed was behind the brutal act. However, law enforcement had a different perspective, stating that without identifying the shooter, it was difficult to determine the motive behind the attack. They also noted that they could not confirm with certainty that the shooting was ordered by Juan Carlos. The tragic case of murder sparked widespread outrage and public debate. Parl's family successfully drew attention to the case, highlighting numerous instances where men had attempted to kill women but escaped punishment. In response to the public outcry, the Mexican General Prosecutor's Office launched a new investigation into the suspect, Juan Carlos Sanchez, and also examined the actions of the judges who had previously released him. The judges who had released Juan Carlos could face consequences for their role in the Parl death if his guilt was proven. Juan Carlos took to social media to demand justice for his former wife's murder. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, accused him of cruelty and shared photos of her mother's hospitalization after Juan Carlos had attacked her with a bat, contradicting her father's claims that he would never harm her mother. Despite the media attention surrounding the case, he was initially allowed to remain free during the investigation. However, he was required to check in with the police weekly and was placed under a restraining order. When he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest for violating the order. As expected, Juan Carlos could not be found, and it was later discovered that he had used his wealth and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexican authorities contacted Interpol, reporting Juan Carlos as a fugitive accused of a serious crime, and he was subsequently declared wanted worldwide. Meanwhile, efforts were underway to locate criminals in Parl's assassination. Surveillance footage from street cameras revealed that the motorcyclist who committed the crime was not alone. 2 vehicles were seen following the car carrying Parl. The motorcyclist appeared to be in constant communication with the occupants of these vehicles, receiving directions and instructions. After several months of investigation, some of the participants were identified, and on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. To everyone's surprise, the suspects did not resist arrest and quickly began cooperating with authorities, hoping to receive lighter sentences. It was confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime, and he had paid a significant amount of money to individuals who were directly involved in the crime. The first to be caught were the driver of one of the getaway cars and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. It was discovered that while Juan Carlos was in prison, he had hired 2 experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards. One of these bodyguards was released from prison a week before Juan Carlos, and the other was released several days after him. After being released from prison, Juan Carlos reconnected with his accomplices and asked them to recruit trustworthy individuals to help carry out the murder of a person in exchange for a large sum of money. Once all participants were in place, Juan Carlos provided detailed instructions about the intended victim's travel schedule and mode of transportation. However, luring his former wife to Mexico City proved to be a challenge. Juan Carlos used coercion, threatening to take their children unless she attended a court appearance. Despite attending the court date, his ex-wife intended to return to Monterrey on the same day, which Juan Carlos knew about through his sources. 3 more individuals involved in the conspiracy were arrested in late October 2020. Initially, they were taken into custody on suspicion of distributing controlled substances, But further investigation at the police station revealed their potential connection to the high-profile crime. The arrested individuals were part of a major drug trafficking gang led by Balto, who had previously served time with Juan Carlos and offered him protection. In exchange for a significant reward, Balto agreed to help Juan Carlos eliminate his ex-wife. A few weeks later, in November 2020, Maldonado, an individual involved in the case, was also arrested. During his testimony, he confirmed that Juan Carlos had sought out reliable individuals to kill his ex-wife and that he had agreed to assist in exchange for a substantial reward. The investigation confirmed that Juan Carlos was the mastermind behind the crime. His earlier attack on Abril with a stick was reclassified as an attempted murder. As a result, the court issued an arrest warrant for Juan Carlos on charges of femicide. However, his location remained unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining suspects involved in the murder of Abril were apprehended. One of them was already serving time for a separate crime. The searches also led to the discovery of the gun used to kill Abril. In total, 9 individuals linked to the same criminal organization were detained, with 7 of them directly involved in the pursuit and shooting of Abril. More than 4 years after the Abril murder, the mastermind behind the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still on the run and his location is unknown. Meanwhile, the man who fired the fatal shot has been convicted and sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 accomplices who participated in the car chase and coordinated with the shooter have each been sentenced to 50 years. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Vincent Brothers. Vincent Brothers was born on May 30, 1962, in Long Island, New York. From a young age, he was known for his charisma, reliability, and diligence. He also served in the Marine Corps Reserves. After graduating from Norfolk State University, Vincent moved to California in the mid-1980s to pursue further education and eventually earned a master's degree. Despite having a successful career as a school administrator, Vincent's personal life was marred by tumultuous relationships. His 2 previous marriages ended in divorce. In 1988, while working at California State University in Bakersfield, Vincent had a daughter with his girlfriend. He took his girlfriend to court to establish paternity and was eventually awarded custody and visitation rights. Initially required to pay $350 per month in child support, this amount was increased to $771 in 2003. That same year, Vincent was convicted of wife abuse and received a 6-day jail sentence and probation. In 1992, Vincent married for the second time, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 1996 due to accusations of intimidation and physical abuse by his second wife. While serving as the assistant principal at Emerson High School, Vincent was accused of sexually harassing a colleague. The woman claimed that Vincent assaulted her at his home and took her phone to prevent her from calling the police. When she tried to report the incident to the police, she said police discouraged her from pursuing charges because she was afraid of Vincent's reputation. The harassment continued at school, with Vincent allegedly touching her inappropriately. The woman eventually resigned from her job as a teacher, citing an unfriendly work environment. The school district investigated Vincent due to his increasingly threatening behavior and threatening phone calls. Despite Vincent denying the allegations and having no disciplinary record, the school district transferred him to another school as a precaution. Vincent then began working at John C. Fremont Elementary School in Bakersfield, California, where he also became famous and respected. Vincent was especially known for ensuring the safety of students by taking them home after school. While teaching at Fremont Elementary School, Vincent met Joni Harper, the school's security supervisor and basketball manager. Vincent and Joni began dating and eventually married after the birth of their first child, Marcus. Their family grew with the arrival of their second child, Lindsay, in 2000. However, Vincent's infidelity caused him and Joni to divorce in September 2001. 2 years later, Vincent and Joni remarried in secret, and their third child, Marshall, was born 4 months later. Joni eventually opened up to her friends about the problems in her marriage. Unlike before, she expressed her fear that Vincent might harm her. However, to those around them, Vincent's family appeared happy and actively involved in the community, often attending local events and maintaining good relationships with others. From the outside, Joni and Vincent's marriage seemed stable. Joni continued to work as a basketball manager, pursuing her passion. However, no one expected that the tragic events hidden behind the family's happy exterior would soon emerge. 3 months before the tragic event, Vincent had moved out of the house due to frequent arguments with his mother-in-law, Ernestine. On July 6, 2003, Joni attended a church service with her 3 children, Marcus, Lindsay, and 6-week-old Marshall, as well as her mother, Ernestine. The family had lunch at Black Angus after the ceremony, then returned home for a nap. As was their custom, Joni and the children stayed in one bedroom, while Ernestine stayed in another room in the house. Tragically, the family was attacked in their home. The killer easily entered the house without signs of forced entry and shot Joni twice in the head while she was in the bedroom. Lindsay was also shot in the back. The noise alerted Ernestine, causing her to quickly arm herself with a .38 revolver and move toward the hallway to investigate. Unfortunately, she was killed before she could defend herself. The attacker shot Ernestine twice in the face, causing her to collapse in the hallway outside her bedroom. The attacker then entered the room and shot Marcus, followed by a fatal shot to the baby's back. Each shot was aimed very carefully. Instead of fleeing the scene immediately, the attacker went to the kitchen to get a knife and then returned to the bedroom. There, the attacker stabbed the victims multiple times in the back. On July 8, 2003, Kelsey Spann, Joni's best friend, became worried when she had not heard from Joni, Ernestine, and Joni's children since they went to church the previous Sunday. Kelsey decided to go to Joni's house to check on them using the key Joni had given her. When she tried to unlock the door, she found it difficult to open due to an obstacle. She then went to the back of the house and found an unlocked sliding glass door, which was unusual. Upon entering the house, Kelsey discovered Joni, her mother Ernestine, and Marcus, Lindsay, and Marshall, all dead. Kelsey immediately contacted authorities at 7 a.m. They arrived at the scene and discovered 5 family members brutally murdered. The family's peaceful home, located in a quiet neighborhood, became the scene of a horrific crime. The police investigation concluded that the family had been tragically killed on Sunday afternoon as they returned from church. Before leaving the scene, the perpetrator covered the bodies in the bedroom with blankets and pillows taken from other rooms. Detectives identified Joni as the primary target due to the severity of her injuries, suggesting the attacker had been extremely angry. Police were concerned about Vincent's safety and discovered he had been in Ohio. Detective Watts traveled to North Carolina, where Vincent was visiting his mother with his brother Melvin. When North Carolina police met with Vincent, they found him severely traumatized and unable to speak coherently, which did not provide many details about the investigation. Vincent's behavior was inconsistent with that of a murderer, and because he had been on the other side of the country when the murder occurred, police initially ruled him out as a suspect. He also provided receipts showing purchases made around the time of the tragedy, confirming that he had not been in Bakersfield, California, where the incident occurred. However, Detective Watts still doubted Vincent's innocence. Notably, Vincent never asked how his wife and children had died, which aroused suspicion. On July 11, 2003, Vincent had returned to Los Angeles without attending their family's memorial service, but Vincent had attended their funeral 5 days later. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Vincent had moved out of his family home in April 2003. Additionally, his wife, Joni, had been planning to divorce him again and had sought child support. Authorities also discovered that Vincent had had a history of violence against women, which had led them to take a closer look at his alibi. Upon further investigation, surveillance video from the store's checkout counters had shown that Melvin, not Vincent, had made the purchase at that time. When confronted, Melvin revealed that Vincent had told him to make these purchases in Vincent's name. Despite their efforts, police were unable to find any witnesses who had seen Vincent between the evening of July 4th and the evening of July 7th. Both Melvin and his family insisted they had not seen Vincent during this time. Although there was no direct evidence linking Vincent to the murder, police discovered he had some suspicious activities. Vincent had rented a car when he had arrived in Columbus, Ohio, and he had stayed at his brother's house. Police suspected Vincent had flown to Columbus on July 2, 2003 to visit family, then returned to Bakersfield on July 4, where the tragic incident had occurred on July 6. He was supposed to return to Ohio on July 7 and had arrived late that evening. Law enforcement had conducted a thorough inspection of the Dodge vehicle, paying special attention to its radiator and air filter. To help identify insects found in the car, investigators had enlisted the expertise of Dr. Lynn Kimsey from the Bohart Museum of Entomology at the University of California, Davis. Dr. Kimsey carefully had analyzed the insects and identified more than 100 species, including several species found only in the western region beyond the Rocky Mountains. The presence of some insects suggested that Vincent had moved at night. By carefully analyzing the insects, Dr. Kimsey had been able to plot a path that showed the car had traveled west from Ohio. Investigators later had tracked down the 5 previous car renters and confirmed that none of them had driven the car to California or near the Rocky Mountains. Police also had examined photographic evidence and found the end of a rubber glove in the laundry room. DNA testing showed a match. It belonged to none other than Vincent Brothers. Detective Watts had discovered that Vincent had been planning to leave town and had begun selling his assets, including putting his house on the market. As a result, Vincent had been arrested on April 30, 2004 and charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder. The trial began in 2007, with prosecutor Lisa Green leading the case. The prosecution argued that Vincent's motive for the murder had been financial, suggesting he had acted out of fear of having to pay child support due to his impending divorce from Joni. The prosecution portrayed Vincent as a serial adulterer who often had disappeared for long periods of time and who could become violent. To support their case, the prosecution called several witnesses, including Dr. Lynn Kimsey, who testified that the insects found in the Dodge were consistent with insects commonly found along Interstate 70. This testimony was further supported by evidence showing 5,424 miles had been driven from July 2 to July 11 in accordance with the prosecution's statement. However, when Melvin had appeared in court, he tried to change his previous testimony, claiming that he had lied to the police about Vincent giving him a credit card to use. In response, the defense presented an expert on high-speed driving, who argued that maintaining an average speed of 70 miles per hour during the trip from Ohio to California had been extremely difficult. The defense also presented its pathologists, who testified that the murders could have occurred as late as Monday morning, July 7, 2003. The defense also had presented interrogation tapes to prove that Melvin had been pressured by police to change his statement. Additionally, they called a witness who claimed to have seen a car accident involving Vincent on Sunday morning, in which a boy on a bicycle had collided with Vincent's rental car at an intersection. Although the incident had not been reported to the police due to the lack of damage or injuries, the prosecution attempted to verify the story. Vincent had taken it upon himself to defend himself. He had strongly denied all accusations about his married life and had firmly denied the accusation of murdering his family. Throughout his testimony, Vincent had become emotional and had shed tears several times. The prosecution had called Carla Tuya, principal of Franklin School, as a witness. She had testified about her past relationship with Vincent, which had begun in 1996 when his son was born and had ended in 2002 when she had decided to end it. Carla revealed a shocking secret that she and Vincent had been intimate just weeks before the family tragedy, directly contradicting Vincent's previous denials about everything. This admission had damaged Vincent's claim to fidelity to his family. The prosecution had argued that the crime had been carefully planned in advance. Thanks to knowing the family's Sunday habits, the murderer had gained an advantage and had had the opportunity to strike. The perpetrator had taken advantage of this and had waited until the whole family was asleep, then had used the spare key to enter the house through the sliding glass door and had killed each family member. On May 15, 2017, Vincent had been found guilty of 5 counts of first-degree murder, making him eligible for the death penalty. The jury had reached this decision after hearing testimony from 137 witnesses and deliberating for nearly 2 days. After the verdict, Vincent had been removed from the courtroom and had been returned to the Luro detention facility under tight security. Then, on September 27, 2007, Darren County Superior Court Judge Michael Bush had sentenced Vincent Brothers to death by lethal injection. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Summer Baldwin. Summer Baldwin is a young girl born in 1976 in Washington. She is known for her friendly, kind and open personality. A good student with many friends, Summer dreams of becoming an actress after graduating from high school. However, that dream did not come true. After enrolling in community college, Summer had difficulty in studying at university. At the invitation of her friends, she decided to move to Lubbock, Texas, to change her life and seek new opportunities. Summer's life began to decline. She gradually became addicted to alcohol and illegal drugs without seeking help from her family. Her addiction got worse over time, leading to her losing her job and associating with people with criminal records. Her dream of becoming an actress was shattered. She eventually had to work as a prostitute to support herself. Meanwhile, Summer's parents, unaware of their daughter's problems and believing she was living a successful life, were devastated when they received news of her tragic death in September 2005. There is little information about Summer's friends or where she frequented. However, there is one important piece of information to note. Just a few months before her death, Summer was a key witness in a major federal counterfeiting case. This suggests that her murder may have been gang-related and possibly premeditated. This attracted the attention of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, which placed the investigation under close scrutiny. The police began their investigation and summoned the first suspects. The police first summoned Rebecca, Summer Baldwin's best friend, for questioning. Rebecca shed some light on Summer's work and revealed some information about Summer's boyfriends. One of them was aggressive when he tried to hold her hand, and kept following her even after they broke up, so that man became the main suspect in the case. However, the police arrested this man and brought him to the police station. But he completely denied his involvement in the case. He seemed genuinely surprised and saddened by the news of Summer's death. Moreover, he had a solid alibi for the night before the tragedy. He had been involved in a bar fight because he was drunk and had to spend the night in a cell with another prisoner. Therefore, the police had to release him. Marguerite, another friend of Summer's, provided vital information to the investigation. She met Summer the night before the murder and they had a conversation. They met on September 11th in the parking lot of a convenience store. A red van pulled up to the store, and a young man of Latino appearance got out of the van and entered the store. At that point, Summer got out of the passenger seat and greeted Marguerite. She told Marguerite that the man was a customer of hers, and that it was the second time she had seen him recently. After the man exited the store, he got into the driver's seat, and Summer got back into the van. Marguerite did not remember which direction the van went. nor where the couple was headed for their date. She also said she had never seen the man before and assumed he was not local. The man had very short hair, like a soldier, but Marguerite couldn't see him clearly because it was dark. Police later discovered a suitcase that was covered in trash and feces, but the contents were intact and new. The label and plastic attachments were still intact, indicating that the person who purchased the suitcase had not removed it. Police investigated and discovered that the suitcase was a large model and was only sold at 2 stores in the city. Police determined that a pair of identical suitcases had been sold the day before the murder at a Walmart store in the area of the city where Summer was last seen. The suitcases were purchased at 2 different times, the first in the afternoon and the second around 2 a.m. This discrepancy in purchase times struck police as odd and suspicious. Police went to the store and requested to review surveillance camera footage. After reviewing the documents, they discovered that the first suitcase had been purchased by an elderly couple. The couple did not arouse suspicion and explained that they had bought it for a vacation. However, the second suitcase was purchased by a young man who appeared to be Latino, had a slim build and very short hair, and looked like a military man. This led the police to suspect that this was the man the witness had mentioned when he saw him with Summer in the supermarket parking lot. This man also bought a pair of disposable gloves. The coincidence was so great that the police believed they had found the right person. This man was very careful to use cash to make payments instead of a card, in order to eliminate any personal traces. However, he did not anticipate that there would be cameras that would detect him. These cameras accurately recorded his license plate number. The police quickly identified the owner of the car as Rosendo Rodriguez, a reservist in the United States Marine Corps. He had been in town for several days with his unit for training. Finding Rodriguez immediately proved difficult, as he had not been at the hotel where his unit was stationed. However, police had his details and discovered that he had withdrawn a large sum of money from an ATM at another hotel, which may have been used to pay for the suitcase and gloves. Rodriguez had not stayed at the hotel where he used the ATM. Instead, a man named Thomas Rodriguez had checked in on September 11th. It turned out to be the same man, but using a different name for reasons unknown. The hotel room Rodriguez had rented, from which he had checked out, had not been cleaned, yielding crucial evidence. There were brown stains and splatters on the carpet, bed, and walls that looked like dried blood. A card from a new suitcase was found near the bed, and a trash bin contained used birth control pills and disposable gloves. Forensic analysis confirmed that the dried blood in the room belonged to Summer, and the DNA on the birth control pills and gloves matched both Summer and Rodriguez. There was no doubt that they had found the killer, but Rodriguez had left town by then. However, with all the information they needed, tracking him down was easy. Rosendo Rodriguez III was born on March 26, 1980, in Wichita Falls, Texas, to a poor Mexican immigrant family. Reports indicate that he experienced violence and harsh treatment as a child. His father, described as domineering and aggressive, struggled with alcoholism and was often abusive to his wife and children. Throughout his childhood, Rodriguez showed an aggressive nature, often getting into fights at school. However, as he grew older, he learned to control his anger. After graduating from high school, he attended Texas Tech University and moved away from his parents, living on his own. He held a variety of jobs before deciding to serve in the U.S. Marine Corps, including working at a pizza parlor, as a mail carrier, and as an office worker. His military colleagues described Rodriguez as quiet, disciplined, and responsible. He was considered a trustworthy friend, always willing to help others, and had a solid academic background. He was also attractive, which made him attractive to women. Rodriguez was arrested on September 15 at his home in San Antonio. When police arrived, he remained calm and appeared unaware of the seriousness of the situation. During the search, a striped shirt and shorts were found, matching the outfit he was wearing when he purchased the suitcase, which was captured on surveillance video. His laptop and cell phone were also confiscated. During the first weeks, Rodriguez remained silent and denied any involvement in the murder of Summer Baldwin. However, the evidence against him was overwhelming, so, on the advice of his lawyer, he began to tell his version of the story, which differed greatly from the scenario set up by forensic experts. Initially, Rodriguez explained that he had accidentally checked into a different hotel than his teammates. He only knew the name of the hotel chain where they would be staying. And after checking in, he realized that the others were staying in a different location. He decided not to move because the military leadership said it was unnecessary. However, he did not explain why he checked into a room under a different name. On the morning of September 10th, Rodriguez rented a van to make it easier to move. That evening, while walking around the city, he said he ran into Summer Baldwin. According to his account, he saw a blonde woman sitting on a bench by the side of the road, covering her face with her hands as if she were crying. Curious and concerned, he stopped to check if she was okay and needed help. They began chatting, she calmed down, and then they went to his hotel room, where they talked and had a few drinks. In his testimony, they were not intimate. The next morning, Rodriguez drove her home, but they agreed to meet in the evening. He picked her up at the same location around 9 p.m. and went to a supermarket where Summer met her friend Marjorie. They then returned to the hotel, where Rodriguez said there was consensual intimacy between them. However, Rodriguez later said that Summer became aggressive and demanded money, which surprised him because he did not realize he was seeing a prostitute. And Summer's demand for money made him feel threatened. He disarmed her and punched her in the face, causing her nose to bleed. Rodriguez claimed that he had no intention of harming Summer and that his actions were in self-defense. However, just a few minutes later, Summer collapsed on the bed, convulsing and foaming at the mouth. Rodriguez said that he tried to help her, but was unable to perform CPR due to the blood and foam on her face. After a minute, Summer stopped breathing and Rodriguez realized that she was dead. He became panicked and took several actions to cover up the incident. Rodriguez went to a nearby store, bought a suitcase and gloves, then returned to the hotel, put Summer's body in the suitcase and threw it in the trash. He knew that the suitcase would be taken to the landfill the next morning. Rodriguez then checked out of the hotel, returned the rental car and drove home to San Antonio, trying to pretend that nothing had happened. However, investigators found several inconsistencies in Rodriguez's testimony that suggested he had lied. One of the key pieces of evidence was the testimony of Marjorie, who met Summer in the parking lot on the night of the murder. Marjorie claimed that Summer made it clear to her that the man was her client, with whom they had previously had a paid encounter. Rodriguez claimed that everything between them was consensual, but evidence on Summer's body suggested that she had been taken advantage of. It is possible that their first night together was consensual, which is why Summer agreed to meet Rodriguez again. However, Rodriguez's testimony that he only hit Summer once in the face to calm her down does not appear to be true. The autopsy revealed approximately 30 new bruises on Summer's head and body on the night of the murder, along with several stab wounds. This suggests that Rodriguez used violence against Summer. Additionally, the fact that Summer was still alive when Rodriguez stuffed her into the suitcase contradicts his testimony that she was dead. Another notable point is that during the investigation at Rodriguez's home, police seized his laptop. When they reviewed his search history, they discovered that Rodriguez had been actively searching for information about Summer, whether the police were looking for her, and whether her body had been found in a dumpster. It is worth noting that Rodriguez also frequently searched for information about Joanna Catherine Rogers, a 16-year-old girl from Lubbock who had gone missing a year and a half earlier. When authorities offered Rodriguez a plea deal in exchange for information about Joanna's fate, he reluctantly accepted and told his story. He said he met Joanna, a high school student in Lubbock, in late April 2004. After several meetings, they went to his hotel room on May 4th. An argument over money ensued, along with threats of a rape lawsuit. Meanwhile, Rodriguez gagged Joanna to keep her quiet, but this action inadvertently caused her death. He then put the body in his suitcase and threw it in the trash to dispose of it. Rodriguez initially confessed to these actions but later recanted, claiming he was coerced. To strengthen the case, the police conducted a large search of the city's landfill in search of Joanna's body. More than a year later, they found a suitcase containing Joanna's body. Although the body was badly decomposed, DNA testing confirmed the identity of the body. The evidence gathered allowed the authorities to charge Rodriguez as a serial killer with heinous crimes and a consistent modus operandi. The trial, sentencing, and execution followed. Despite the overwhelming evidence of guilt and the severity of the case, Rodriguez continued to hope to avoid the death penalty until the very end. However, the court made a different decision due to newly discovered information. The victim, Summer Baldwin, was 3 months pregnant at the time of her death. This aggravating factor led to the court finding Rodriguez guilty of first-degree murder and sentencing him to death by lethal injection. Rodriguez and his attorney appealed several times, but were all rejected. On March 27, 2018, nearly 10 years after his conviction, Rosendo Rodriguez was executed at the Huntsville prison in Texas. It was the 4th execution in Texas and the 7th in the United States in 2018. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neil Entwistle. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978 in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England. His parents, Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle, raised him and his younger brother Russell in a small house. His father, Clifford, worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor consultant, and his mother, Yvonne, worked as a cook in the school canteen. After finishing high school, Neil attended York University to study electrical engineering and business management. While at the university, he met Rachel Souza, an American student studying abroad. From Kingston, Massachusetts. Rachel attended Silver Lake Regional High School and later transferred to Holy Cross College in Worcester. During her year at York University, she joined the rowing team, where she met Neil. Described as reserved and unsociable, Neil impressed his friends with his calm demeanor. Rachel, on the other hand, was outgoing, and her American background added to her charm. As a result, she was popular while on the rowing team. Neil and Rachel spent more time together, and they became closer. Neil and Rachel found themselves attracted to each other. Neil worked at a defense and security technology company in Malvern, Worcestershire. Meanwhile, Rachel pursued a career in education. After completing her studies in 2002, she became an English drama and theater teacher at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch. Neil shared a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, joking that his job was making bombs and other things for a living. He also expressed his happiness about his upcoming wedding to Rachel, whom he called the most wonderful woman in the world. They met through sailing and formed a deep bond. Although he said he felt a little unhappy living south of the border in Birmingham, he was excited about his future with Rachel. In August 2003, the couple married in 2 ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK and one in Massachusetts, USA. Following the ceremony in the US, they had a reception in the UK. Neil created a family website where he shares updates about their life in Worcester. The couple's daughter, Lillian Rose, was born in April 2005, leading to their decision to move to the US. They initially lived with Rachel's mother, Priscilla Matarazzo, and stepfather, Joseph, in Carver, Massachusetts, before moving to their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home, located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, offers a quiet setting just a short walk from the nearest major city. The 5-bedroom home rents for $1,500 a month, which is quite expensive. Neil, a computer programmer and IT professional, is having trouble finding work, which is causing financial stress and debt. To ease his financial burden, Neil turns to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business is affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, which brings in eBay's fraud investigators. During the proceedings, it is discovered that Neil has been using multiple accounts under different names. During this time, Neil runs a website called millionmaker.co.uk. The site promoted a get-rich-quick scheme targeting those in the adult entertainment industry, offering 24/7 support. The site promised a guaranteed monthly profit of $6,000 within the first 6 months. However, the site was eventually shut down. At the same time, Neil was using online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited sites such as Adult Friend Finder, Half-Price Escorts, Nightlife, and Hot Local Euro Escorts for this purpose. Neil created a profile on Adult Friend Finder and emailed several women, saying he was looking for sexual partners. Investigators found incriminating content on his laptop, including a profile in which he mentioned wanting to meet American women of various ages to confirm rumors about their sexual prowess. His profile suggested a straightforward and mutually beneficial approach to meeting like-minded people. During his trial, Neil revealed that he had searched online for blondes, suggesting that he was still interested in such services. His online searches, most recently on January 18, 2006, included terms such as Worcester Escort Services and Worcester Escorts on Google. However, Neil's actions were not simply a search for escorts and other women. Neil conducted an alarming array of online searches. He searched for terms such as knife to the throat, kill, and how to kill with a knife. These searches were interspersed with more conventional searches for employment opportunities, travel, and ways to make quick money. Additionally, during this time, Neil traveled to Carver to visit his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo. Joe was a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club in Carver. After being taught how to shoot by Joe, Neil planned to steal a gun from Joe's collection at their home in Carver, Massachusetts. He went to his parents-in-law's home, retrieved the weapon from a storage location in the home, and drove back to Hopkinton with the gun in hand. Upon returning home, he discreetly hid the gun, waiting for the opportunity to commit a tragic act of violence against his family, before ending his own life. On January 20, 2006, Neil entered the bedroom where his wife Rachel and 9-month-old daughter Lillian were sleeping. He shot Rachel, 27, in the head, then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and into Rachel's left chest. That same day, while his wife's family was still at work, he returned to Carver, returning the weapon without cleaning it. After leaving Carver, Neil went to Logan Airport in Boston. That evening, January 20, 2006, he withdrew a total of $800 from an ATM in 2 transactions. However, a third attempt to withdraw an additional $420 was rejected. The next day, Saturday, January 21, 2006, Neil purchased a one-way ticket to London without luggage. At around 5 p.m., he boarded a British Airways flight, which departed from Boston at 8:15 p.m. That Saturday evening, Neil had invited some neighbors over for dinner. Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen arrived at around 7 p.m. and found the house locked, but the lights were still on inside. Worried, they tried to call Rachel's mother, but were unable to reach her. Panicking, they decided to call 911 for assistance. The police quickly arrived at Neil's house at around 8:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the scene, noticing inside the bedroom was a large, unmade bed with all the clothes piled in the middle of the bed. Except for the unmade bed, everything else in the house appeared to be in order. After completing the search, the police locked the house and left to continue patrolling. Although the police continued to search, Joanna and Maureen were still extremely worried about Rachel's family. They decided to spend the night in the car, waiting for the family to return. Despite the cold, they made several trips to the gas station bathroom during the night, anxiously waiting for any news. The next morning, Sunday, the sisters gained access to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a neighbor the night before. When they entered the house, they found evidence that the family had just finished eating, with dishes and leftovers in the kitchen. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the parents had just bathed their newborn daughter. They went into the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally to the living room. After Rachel's mother and stepfather arrived, they assessed the situation together and decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. Sergeant Michael returned to the house for a second search. This time, when he entered the basement, he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor that had not been there the day before. He followed the smell through the house until he reached the master bedroom. There, he found the bodies of Rachel and Lillian on the unmade bed, covered in clothes. Rachel's arms were stretched out across Lillian's chest, and her legs were drawn up beside her daughter. Both were wearing pajamas. An autopsy later revealed that Rachel had been shot in the head and Lillian in the torso. Further investigation found Rachel's DNA on the barrel of the gun and Neil's DNA on the stock. Neil Entwistle, 27, was initially listed as a missing person. Michael Fabry, Assistant District Attorney for Middlesex County, stated that the main priority on the first night was to find Neil as his location and condition were unknown, raising concerns for his safety. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil visited his parents, Clifford and Yvonne. He had driven and spent the previous night at a hotel. During the visit, he told his parents that he had found the bodies of his wife and daughter. On Monday, January 23, 2006, Neil had a 2-hour telephone conversation with State Police Constable Robert Manning of the Hopkinton Police Department. The conversation was recorded and later played back in full during the court proceedings. Neil explained that after finding the bodies, he became extremely frightened and quickly went to his family. He told police that he had covered the bodies with sheets and then thought of the knives in the house. He picked up a large knife and stabbed himself, but was too afraid of the pain to use it. Neil appeared confused as to why he did not call an ambulance. Neil could not bring himself to use a knife to harm himself. He told police that he then drove the family car to his father-in-law Joe Matarazzo's house to retrieve a .22 LR revolver. However, he found the house locked. Rather than explore other options, Neil decided to fly back to England to stay with his parents. On January 26, 2006, U.S. police arrived in the UK to question Neil. The following day, January 27th, after speaking to a lawyer at his parents' home, Neil refused to meet with U.S. police at the U.S. Embassy in London. Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza. They were buried together in a coffin. About 500 people attended the funeral, but Neil was absent. His name was not mentioned at the service and is not inscribed on their joint headstone. Instead, Neil sent a bouquet of flowers consisting of an orange rose and a white lily with a note attached to a ribbon. The note read, "My orange roses and lilies forever," and was signed Sakoko. Upon his return to England, Neil appeared to have returned to his usual routine. In February 2006, despite the constant media attention outside his parents' home in Waltham, he attended a dinner in Notting Hill with his old crew from York University. About a week after Rachel and Lillian's funerals, he also went to the movies. On February 8, 2006, the Middlesex District Attorney's Office issued a warrant for Neil's arrest. The following day, Neil was arrested by London's Metropolitan Police at Royal Oak Station as he prepared to board a train. At the time of his arrest, Neil had a notebook in which he planned to sell his story to the highest bidder. The notebook also included affectionate notes about his orange rose and a person named Lily. Neil referred to his wife as "my dearest and most beloved friend" in the notebook. He also wrote 2 letters to the editor sharing his story and had contacted a close friend about his plans. In one of the letters, Neil asked about the amount of money he might receive for sharing his entire story exclusively. Neil chose not to contest the extradition order. On February 15th, he was returned to the United States and appeared in Framingham County Court. The court ordered him held without bail at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil was formally charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. He pleaded not guilty to these charges. In December 2006, nearly a year after the tragic incident, Middlesex County Jail police found letters Neil had written to his parents and attorney. The letters revealed his struggles with depression and hinted that he may have been thinking about ending his life. As a result, he was temporarily transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being returned to Middlesex County Jail. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordless believed that Neil's behavior was the result of Asperger's syndrome, a view also shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, jury selection for the trial in Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. Concerns arose over the high-profile nature of the case and whether Neil would receive a fair trial. The trial officially began on June 2, 2008, in Wrentham, Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led Neil's defense team. During the trial, Weinstein attempted to block the prosecution from using DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. He also attempted to exclude other evidence found in the family home because the police did not have a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil chose not to call any witnesses or testify in his own defense. Those who attended the trial noted that Neil showed little emotion throughout the trial. On June 25, 2008, Neil Entwistle was convicted of first-degree murder, as well as possession of a firearm and ammunition without a license. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, Neil told family and friends in court not to worry, saying, "I'll be fine." He was initially sent to the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. However, in August 2008, Neil shaved his head, thinking it would protect him from a white supremacist gang in prison. But instead of protecting him, the gang said they would kill him and viewed his actions as a futile attempt to gain their favor. As a result, Neil was transferred to protective custody for his own safety. Then, in December, Neil was transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a medium-security prison in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. The transfer was made for his own safety due to threats against his life, according to the Department of Corrections. The deaths of Rachel and her infant daughter had a profound impact on their family and friends. In the wake of the loss, the community rallied to offer support and comfort to her grieving family. The story of Neil Entwistle and Rachel Sousa is a heartbreaking reminder that even people who appear to have perfect lives can be hiding difficulties. Hopefully, the stories of Rachel and her daughter will help us to stay vigilant and to cherish the time we have with our loved ones. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Rahman family. Jean-Claude Rahman was born on February 11, 1954, in Lille, France, and grew up in Clairvaux in the Jura region. He completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at the University of Lyon but lasted only 1 semester before dropping out. He then went to medical school and eventually married a woman named Florence Cray. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956, and studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. There, she met Jean-Claude Roman, a distant relative of her family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not attract Florence's attention, and they did not know each other very well, nor did they spend much time together. However, over time, through mutual friends and study sessions, they began to spend more time together. Jean-Claude immediately fell in love with Florence and tried to win her over. However, Florence saw him as just an ordinary guy, nothing special, and not very articulate. She had envisioned herself marrying a typical doctor, smart, attractive, and charming. After failing her second exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Jean-Claude, they continued to support each other in their studies and exams until they graduated in the next decade. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman got married. 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline was born, their son, Antoine, was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother. She worked in local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband, Jean-Claude, worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. After Christmas 1992, Florence went out and traveled around France for a few days. During that time, their children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was working in Geneva. Jean-Claude Roman kept his work life private, sharing very little information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important and respected medical research. He maintained a clear boundary between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence could never call his office phone, as Jean-Claude insisted on not being disturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she could send him a text message, and he would call her back as soon as possible. Friends often asked about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO, wanting to know exactly what he did there. Florence usually dodged the question by giggling and admitting that she was not sure either. Sometimes, she joked that maybe one day she would find out her husband was a secret agent. Every year at Christmas, the WHO holds an office Christmas tree decoration event, allowing employees to bring their families to participate. In Christmas 1992, Florence learned about the event, but her husband never mentioned it to her. Florence felt anxious and insecure about his situation. From an acquaintance revealing that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory to discovering that her family was not mentioned at his workplace after more than a decade of service, these things may have affected Florence's mental state. The extent to which these revelations impacted Florence remains unclear, as it is not known whether she confronted her husband about the matter. According to Florence's brother, who went on holiday with the family, Florence appeared to fall into a deep depression during those days. During this time, family conversations became only speculative. As the new year of 1993 approached, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman went shopping together a few days later, and Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy a new suit, which she eventually convinced him to do. On that same day, after leaving from his wife, Jean-Claude went to a pharmacy and placed an order for January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, he withdrew 2,000 francs from 2 different ATMs. Before heading to a gun store, Jean-Claude gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met. After leaving the store, he took several items with him, including a pepper spray canister, a box of bullets, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun gun. The night passed peacefully upon his return home. On January 11th, at 4 a.m., an emergency call was made to the fire department, reporting that a fire was raging in the house. In the early hours of the morning, garbage collectors discovered the house on fire and quickly alerted the fire brigade. As the firefighters arrived and began extinguishing the flames, they noticed movement in an upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone inside needed help. Paramedics were called, and Jean-Claude Roman, who had been trapped in his residence, was rescued. When he was brought out, he appeared to be in a state of shock and unresponsive to the paramedics. Jean-Claude was then taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was extinguished, allowing the fire brigade to enter. Jean-Claude's family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was called to the scene and witnessed the horrific sight as stretchers carried the charred bodies of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence away from the scene. When a fire causes death in a family, the police conduct an investigation to clarify the details of the incident. This process aims to provide closure to the grieving families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Consequently, after the tragic fire, law enforcement agencies launched an investigation due to the significant loss suffered by the family of a prominent doctor. During the autopsy of Florence's body, the medical team discovered evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. This raised suspicion and curiosity, especially after it was determined that Florence's death was caused by blunt force trauma rather than by the fire. The autopsy results of the children revealed another heart-wrenching truth. Contrary to initial assumptions, Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, rather, they had died earlier from gunshot wounds. This suggests that events occurred before the house burned down. Following the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths of Florence and her children, law enforcement launched an investigation. However, with Jean-Claude Roman in a coma and unable to provide any information, investigators faced challenges pursuing alternative leads, leaving the Rome home as the crime scene. Officials contacted the victim's family, acquaintances, and neighbors to gather more information about the events surrounding the case. Dr. Luc Ladmiral, who witnessed the victims being taken away from the scene, was also contacted as part of the investigation. Amidst the uncertainty, Luc struggles to make sense of the situation. When questioned by investigators about family enemies, Luc is unable to identify anyone. However, he is summoned for questioning a few days later. Luc finds himself under police investigation regarding his family's connections and recent events that may have caused the fire. Despite extensive questioning, the conclusion remains the same: the family has a good reputation, and no significant incidents occurred prior to the tragedy. Then attention turns to Jean-Claude, who reveals a shocking piece of information: he has never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor has he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he is not a qualified doctor, let alone employed in any medical capacity. Luc is initially skeptical, but as he recalls their shared school experience, his suspicions grow. This leads to a startling realization. He tells the authorities about an incident that occurred during his sophomore year when he noticed Jean-Claude absent from an exam. The change in Jean-Claude's usual behavior worries Luc. When he visits Jean-Claude at home, he observes signs of poor health, including clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude claims he is being treated for lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, but the condition is exacerbated by stress related to the exam. At Jean-Claude's request, Luc pledges to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determine that Luc has no further details. They therefore wait for the results of the forensic examination of the burnt house, hoping to gather more information for the investigation. Investigators note unusual details in the house. They find that all the doors are locked from the inside, indicating that no one had illegally entered. Initially, the hypothesis of an accidental fire is put forward, but this changes when the condition of the bodies is revealed. The new findings point to a more sinister scenario, necessitating an interview with Jean-Claude. While he remains unconscious for weeks, the authorities focus on him as the main suspect, initiating a full investigation. Although Jean-Claude does not have a medical degree, his long studies at the university raised suspicions. When the educational institution is contacted, they confirm that he had been studying for 12 years. Although he successfully completed the first-year exam, he failed the second-year exam. Taking advantage of the lack of admission restrictions, Jean-Claude repeatedly re-enrolled in the second year throughout his studies. Despite devoting much time and effort to studying, attending lectures, and reviewing medical texts, he still cannot pass the second exam, which is puzzling. It is possible that staying up late and missing the exam was a significant factor. He was given the opportunity to retake the exam several months later, but he did not take it. As investigators continue to probe the deaths of Florence and the children, they face another horrifying discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, wanting to break the bad news to Jean-Claude's parents, goes to their home only to be met with an unusual silence. Upon entering, he discovers the bodies of Jean-Claude's parents, both victims of gunshot wounds. The investigation confirms that Jean-Claude's parents had been shot with the same type of gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. Their deaths occur close together, suggesting that the events are related. After the tragedies are made public, the mystery deepens. The police receive a call from a woman who does not want to reveal her identity or any personal information and is hesitant to participate in the investigation. However, she provides one crucial piece of information: she has become romantically involved with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She also claims that he is not a researcher at the World Health Organization. He had deceived her into believing that he was an influential expert. The woman was tricked into believing that Jean-Claude was actively involved in and funding important research projects. He also described banks in Geneva as very profitable. Using his POS he deceived her into investing money in a Swiss bank with an 18% interest rate, which turned out to be a trap. Employing persuasive techniques, Jean-Claude convinced his girlfriend to invest her money. She was initially hesitant, but they eventually reached an agreement. She would provide him with 990,000 francs to invest, hoping to receive a return in 3 months. As the payment deadline approached in early January, the woman reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she needed the money to support herself and her family. After some negotiation, they arranged to meet for dinner. He invited her to dinner with a prominent political figure, intending to generate interest and hopefully recover her investment. On the agreed date, he picked her up in Paris to begin the trip they had been anticipating. As night fell, Jean-Claude and the woman got lost. Suddenly, he stopped the car and attacked her inside. He used tear gas, stun guns, and cables against her. However, she fought fiercely for her life and managed to escape from the car. He chased her but agreed to stop when he begged for mercy. It seemed he realized his plan had failed and pleaded for forgiveness. The excuse he gave the woman was one that had become familiar to investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike himself. The woman agreed to keep quiet about the incident in exchange for Jean-Claude bringing her home safely. Investigators started to piece together a better understanding of him. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a con man. The question that haunted the detectives was he also a killer? After waking from his coma, Jean-Claude was quickly approached by investigators to discuss their remaining suspicions. They expected him to confess, but he chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, staring blankly into space, unresponsive when asked about the events of January 9th, the origin of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the serious injuries his wife suffered, and the discovery of his parents' deaths. He was subjected to repeated interrogations, but despite relentless questioning, he refused to reveal anything. It was only when investigators informed him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that he changed. What prompted him to finally break his silence remains unclear, but he eventually began to talk. According to him, on the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were having a typical evening at home. After putting their children to bed, they retired to their bedroom. According to his recollection, the entire situation came to a sudden end when he recalled the horrific scene of finding his wife sprawled on the bed, surrounded by blood and holding a blood-stained rolling pin. It is unclear what happened. Perhaps there was an argument, but Jean-Claude went to bed with his wife and woke up the next morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine sat on the couch, watching cartoons that their father had chosen. He served each of them a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother's absence, he told them that she was not feeling well and needed more rest. That morning, Jean-Claude noticed that Caroline was feeling ill and was concerned about her health. He guided Caroline to the bedroom upstairs. Caroline then lay face down on the bed with a pillow over her head, but the reason for this was not explained. Jean-Claude was unable to provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding the chain of events. However, he speculated that the incident may have been related to a game he had been playing with his daughter. He then used a .22 caliber rifle fitted with a silencer to fatally shoot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of the head. Antoine similarly met a tragic end. After the incident, his memory became hazy. The evidence presented at trial showed that he left home, bought a newspaper, and went about his daily activities, appearing normal to people. He then returned home and watched television. Although Jean-Claude denied these details at trial, one event was certain: he received an invitation from his parents to have lunch on the day of the incident. He accepted the invitation, left his quiet abode to drive to his parents' house, and joined them for lunch. He then tricked his father into going upstairs under the pretext of checking a faulty boiler. Despite his father's old age, he still attempted to perform the requested inspection but was unexpectedly shot in the back by his own son. When he returned to his mother's place, he did not make up any excuses this time. His mother became the only victim, shot by him when he faced her. The motive behind these actions remains unclear. Before leaving, he also killed the family dog. When asked about this at trial, it was the only time he showed remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears and revealed that the dog had been very much loved by his children, bringing back memories of Caroline. At that point, Jean-Claude decided to return home and commit suicide. However, his plan did not go as intended. He had previously had a mistress who had provided him with 990,000 francs with the promise of an investment scheme, which was how Jean-Claude supported himself. He told many people, including his relatives and Florence's family, stories of the profits from these investments. People who trusted he entrusted him with managing their finances. This allowed he to gradually accumulate a large sum of money. He then transferred the money to private bank accounts in Geneva, avoiding the scrutiny of tax authorities and others. He had carefully managed the family finances, ensuring that his wife, Florence, had no knowledge of his fraudulent activities. However, the time had come to face the consequences of what he had done. As expected, people began to demand that he return our money along with the promised profits. Unfortunately, this was an obligation he could not fulfill. All of his income was immediately used to meet current needs, leaving him with virtually no savings, despite having accumulated over 2 million francs over the years. It was time for him to come clean and share the truth with Florence and the others who had entrusted him with their money. He found that he could no longer maintain this lies, and the mounting pressure made him feel trapped with no clear way out. Like many others, he convinced himself that by ending the lives of his loved ones, he would save his family from the consequences of his wrongdoings. He then planned to commit suicide to avoid facing the harsh reality. He believed that he could continue lying forever and never thought that he would be discovered or that he would have to confess. He kept coming up with other lies to maintain the pattern throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial of Jean-Claude began. During the trial, he sat silently, avoiding eye contact and keeping his head down, with police on either side. On July 2, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for 22 years for the murder of his wife, children, and parents. In 2019, Jean-Claude Roman applied for release from prison to live in a monastery. During his incarceration, he reportedly became a devout Christian, accepted his mistakes, and vowed to spend the rest of his life repenting as punishment. The judge accepted his plea, citing his good behavior as a factor worth considering. However, it is unfortunate that all the victims suffered at the hands of this deceitful, manipulative, and cruel man. As we reflect on this heartbreaking event, we cannot help but feel compassion for those whose lives were taken so suddenly and for the families and friends who suffered their loss. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tara Baker. Tara Louise Baker was born on January 20, 1977, in East Point, Georgia. Her parents got divorced when she was a child, and her mother later married again. Tara had 2 younger brothers and a younger sister, making her the eldest of 4 siblings. From an early age, Tara showed a strong interest in the law and aspired to be a lawyer or judge. She demonstrated this by conducting mock trials with her stuffed animals, creating contracts with family members, and she also writing letters to politicians. She even wrote to the President of the United States once to complain about his speech interrupting her favorite TV show. After graduating from high school, Tara attended Georgia College, where she earned 2 bachelor's degrees in just 3 years, graduating early. She then enrolled at the University of Georgia in 1999 to pursue further education. The university, located in Athens, was one of the top law schools in the country and was conveniently close to her parents' home. Just a few hours away. Because not wanting to live in a dorm again, Tara opted for off-campus housing. She rented a room in a house that was divided into 3 separate rooms, sharing the space with 2 other university students, one of whom was a familiar face from her college days. Tara was employed at a respected law firm in downtown Athens, which enabled her to pay her living expenses and gain valuable work experience in her chosen field. In January 2001, at the age of 23 and in her second year of studies, Tara spent a significant amount of time at the university library. The evening of January 18th followed this pattern. She and a friend went to the library, where they studied for several hours. Around 7:30 p.m., her friend left for home, but Tara chose to stay longer. At about 9:46 p.m., Tara called her friend to check that she had arrived home safely and mentioned her intention to leave the library in a few minutes. The next day, Virginia Baker, Tara's mother, got a phone call. The caller claimed to be a detective and asked if Tara had ever been arrested, explaining they needed her fingerprints. Virginia initially thought it was a prank call and hung up. But then she called the Athens police station to verify. They confirmed the caller was a real detective and told her there had been a fire at Tara's house. Virginia, still confused, asked to speak to Tara. The detective said they couldn't locate her and had found an unidentified body in the house, which is why they needed Tara's fingerprints. At the crime scene, investigators searched for evidence, but the room was badly damaged from the fire and water. It was later discovered that some items that survived the fire were not checked for fingerprints. Tara's laptop was missing from her room, which was unusual since it was a bulky item and other valuables were left untouched. This raised suspicions that the motive might not have been a robbery gone wrong. With no signs of forced entry, investigators suspected that Tara may have known her killer and let them in. The detective provided more information. stating that only one of Tara's roommates had been located so far, and that person was not at home when the fire occurred. However, the other roommate and Tara herself remained unaccounted for, leading investigators to suspect that the unidentified body might be one of them. When Virginia asked the detective to describe the room where the body was discovered, the response left her stunned. The detective explained that the room was packed with antique items, which was consistent with Tara's long-standing hobby of collecting such things. Tara's family rushed to Athens, hoping that the situation was a misunderstanding and that Tara was safe. Upon arrival at the police station, they were left waiting for hours without receiving any updates. Eventually, a detective met with them and delivered devastating news. The body found in the house was Tara's, and she had been murdered, not a victim of the fire. The detective, claiming exhaustion, declined to answer their questions at that time. However, before departing, he revealed that Tara had unknowingly left behind a crucial piece of evidence, fragments of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails, which could potentially aid in identifying the killer. Tara's relatives were shocked and devastated by the news of her murder. The police refused to provide them with more information, despite their repeated pleas. Desperate for answers, the family made multiple attempts to contact the police, but were continually rebuffed. In fact, the police department never reached out to the family on their own, forcing Tara's relatives to repeatedly call and visit the station to gather scraps of information. Over time, they were able to slowly piece together some details of what had occurred. Tara's family discovered that firefighters may have inadvertently destroyed crucial evidence while extinguishing the blaze, a common occurrence in such situations. The firefighters' primary objective was to put out the fire and potentially rescue survivors, unaware that a murder victim was inside. Furthermore, the investigators failed to secure the crime scene after finding the body, allowing unauthorized access to the area. As Tara's relatives sought information, they faced resistance from the police, who were unwilling to keep them informed about the investigation. The family was also subjected to rudeness and unprofessional behavior from the authorities. In an effort to document their interactions, they began recording conversations with the police and filed complaints against local investigators, but this did not yield any results. The family decided to investigate Tara's death on their own and enlisted the help of a well-known criminologist. However, the local police department would only share case materials with him if he agreed to keep all information and findings confidential, even from Tara's family. For 10 years, the family was unable to obtain Tara's death certificate. They finally received it after writing to the state governor. But the certificate did not provide a detailed cause of death, only stating multiple injuries. Determining the exact time of death was difficult. Medical experts estimated it to be between 10 p.m., when Tara left the library, and 11 a.m., when neighbors called the fire department. However, it is likely that the crime occurred closer to the morning hours, as the fire did not take long to spread. The police investigation found witnesses who reported seeing a middle-aged white man running down the street on the morning of the murder. He was only wearing a t-shirt and jeans, which was unusual given the winter weather. Additionally, the police discovered that a few days before the murder, a man who sounded heavily intoxicated called Tara's university and asked for her phone number. The university had a phone number that students and faculty could call to request student information, such as phone numbers. The intoxicated-sounding man was only able to write down Tara's phone number correctly on his 8th attempt. The investigation into Tara's murder raised several suspicions, but the identity of the man involved remained unknown. At the time of her death, Tara was in a relationship with a boyfriend. Despite his confirmed alibi, the police were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. They continued to scrutinize him, making late-night calls to him and his parents, requesting that he travel to a nearby city for further questioning, DNA sampling, or a polygraph test. Notably, it was Tara's boyfriend who was tasked with identifying her body. He had been living in another city but promptly arrived in Athens upon learning of the fire, even though Tara's parents were already present in town. When the police asked the boyfriend to identify the body, they took him to the house but did not let him enter. A police officer went inside, took a photo of the body, and showed it to the boyfriend on the camera screen. The boyfriend was shocked and said he could not be certain if it was Tara. He mentioned that he had given her earrings, and if he saw them, he would know for sure. The officer went back inside, removed the earrings from the body, and showed them to the boyfriend. Only after seeing the earrings did the boyfriend confirm that the body was Tara's. The police then focused on another man, a student in Tara's classes with a troubling reputation. Several female students came forward and reported that this individual would often ask girls out on dates and not accept no as an answer. He had also asked Tara out multiple times, despite knowing she had a boyfriend. Some girls reported that he exhibited creepy behavior, making them feel uneasy. Despite investigating this person, detectives couldn't find any evidence connecting him to the crime. In a contentious move, they even asked Tara's friends to monitor him, but it yielded no results. Investigators also considered another suspect, an attorney at Tara's workplace. They discovered that just before the murder, he began acting strangely. This attorney had been part of a close-knit group of colleagues who regularly socialized outside of work. But he abruptly stopped participating in their gatherings. Moreover, just days before the incident, he had informed Tara that he would be unable to attend her birthday celebration, which was set to take place the day after the murder. On January 19th, before the fire began, one of Tara's colleagues attempted to persuade him to change his mind and attend the celebration, as Tara valued their friendship and was hurt by his sudden refusal. The colleague visited his office but found him absent, which was unusual given that his workday had already started. He was typically present in the office during morning hours, but not on that particular day. The colleague also checked his schedule, wondering if he had meetings, but it was empty. He failed to show up to work that day, but the following day, he visited another colleague's house and acted strangely. Many people who knew the attorney suspected he regularly used illicit substances, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. However, another detail raised more suspicion. His colleague noticed several fresh scratches on his neck. It was previously discovered that skin particles from the perpetrator were found under Tara's nails, indicating she likely scratched her attacker. The attorney claimed the scratches on his neck came from a cat and denied any involvement in Tara's murder. His behavior became even more bizarre when asked who he thought committed the crime. He suddenly became agitated, shouting that it was Tara's father, but failed to provide any explanation or evidence to support this accusation. A further unusual circumstance was the sudden resignation of the attorney a few months after the murder, followed by his departure from the state. It remains unclear if the police ever compared his DNA to the samples found under the victim's fingernails or if these samples were even analyzed. As with other aspects of the investigation, the detectives did not disclose any information, not even to Tara's family. Subsequent police findings revealed that the attorney had been discreetly involved with two female colleagues from his workplace, despite the fact that he got married. This discovery could potentially explain his peculiar behavior and unexplained absences from work. Additionally, both women claimed they were certain he was using illegal substances. Police found no evidence linking the lawyer to the murder, clearing him as a suspect. A maintenance company with access to a spare key was also questioned, but yielded no results. The case has seen little progress, with authorities keeping investigation details confidential to avoid impeding progress. Over time, several potential leads emerged in the case. A witness came forward claiming to have seen an African-American man outside Tara's house a few hours before the fire. Another person mentioned noticing blood on a notebook belonging to one of Tara's university classmates shortly after the murder. Despite investigating these leads, police were unable to make any progress. Tara's parents offered a $77,000 reward for any information that could help solve the case. However, as the years passed, the team of detectives working on the case changed multiple times, and the new investigators were unable to crack the case. The primary challenge was the lack of evidence, as the fire and the subsequent actions of the firefighters destroyed nearly all potential evidence in Tara's room. In 2019, a podcast covering Tara's 19-year-old murder case was released, bringing together her family, key individuals, and all known information about the crime. This sparked renewed interest and caught the attention of the police department, who began communicating more with Tara's family. As a result, the police re-examined the case, although no new breakthroughs were made. The podcast continued to cover Tara's story for 2 years, ultimately having a substantial impact on the case's progression. The Georgia government introduced a bill to reduce the number of unsolved cases in the state, partly due to Tara's case. The bill was named after Tara and Rhonda Coleman, an 18-year-old woman from Georgia who was murdered in 1990 and whose killer remains unknown. Although the two murders are unrelated, the initiative was called the Coleman-Baker Bill. In 2023, the bill passed unanimously, and the governor signed it in Athens, accompanied by the families of both victims. The law created a special unit within the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to focus on unsolved cases. It also gave victims' families the right to ask police to re-examine these cases and take new steps to solve them. After the law passed in 2023, a unit was formed to investigate Tara's murder. Detectives re-reviewed all available information and re-examined the limited evidence using modern DNA analysis. This process took several months until a breakthrough was announced at a press conference on May 13, 2024. After 23 years, police revealed that the perpetrator had been caught. The culprit was identified as 48-year-old Edric Lamont Faust. Investigators did not reveal the exact methods used to identify him, but stated that advanced DNA analysis and biological evidence were crucial in the process. To avoid compromising the ongoing legal case, they withheld specific details, which will be disclosed during the trial. The arrest documents listed multiple charges against Edric, including assault, which may have allowed for a DNA match. Additionally, skin cells found under the victim's nails may have been analyzed using modern tools to extract the killer's DNA. As for Edric, his extensive criminal record, which included numerous arrests for various offenses, should have put him in the FBI database long ago. At the time of Tara's murder, Edric was 25 years old and lived in the same city as the victim. However, the police found no evidence to suggest that Edric knew Tara, leading them to believe he may have broken into her home or tricked her into letting him in. Edric was not a suspect in the case until a few days before his arrest, when new DNA analysis methods brought him to the attention of detectives. He is currently in jail awaiting trial. The evidence the police have against him will be revealed during the trial process. The fact that Edric was denied bail suggests that the detectives have obtained conclusive DNA evidence. The police are certain that Edric is responsible for Tara's murder, and as a result, her case is now officially closed. There is currently no verdict for Edric. He was charged with 1 count of premeditated murder, 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of burglary, 2 counts of aggravated sodomy, 1 count of rape, 1 count of aggravated assault, first-degree arson, and possession of a knife during the commission of a felony. Tara's family finally has closure after 23 years of searching for the truth. They expressed gratitude to the new team of detectives who helped solve her case. In contrast, Rhonda Coleman's case, which the law is also named after, remains unsolved. However, her family may now feel hopeful that new evidence will be uncovered and justice will be served, just like in Tara's case.